Chicago residents and families of the victims of the latest fatal police shootings are demanding answers this morning. Police shot and killed 19-year-old Quintonio LeGrier and his downstairs neighbor, 55-year-old Betty Jones, after LeGrier's father called police reporting a domestic disturbance, saying that his son was threatening him with a baseball bat. Chicago police quickly acknowledged that Jones was shot by accident and announced that the officer would be placed on a 30-day administrative duty. But they've released few other details as they conduct this investigation. Joining me now to discuss the incident and its legal implications, CNN legal analyst Philip Holloway. He's also a former police officer and police trainer. Also joining me is Laura Coates. She's a former assistant U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia and also the author of the new book, You Have the Right, A Constitutional Guide to Policing the Police. So first to you, Philip, the shooting is renewing questions about police training and how they deal with mental health crisis. Do you think a taser would have been effective, as some neighbors are saying, given perhaps the speed with which LeGrier was traveling towards him with a bat, according to initial reports?
Well, let me first off start by saying that the criminal justice system in general is ill-equipped to deal with mental health issues, and this extends all the way to police. They get very little training in it, at least nationwide. Now, individual departments, of course, can expand upon that. You talked about less than lethal options. That's always something that a police officer wants to consider if possible. We don't know yet. There's really two legal questions. First, was the initial use of deadly force authorized under the law? But the second question really has to be, if it was authorized, did they carry out their actions lawfully or negligently? You don't fire your weapon, basically, unless you know, first off, what the target is, and more particularly, what's behind it. That is basic firearms 101, and that is where my big problem is with this case at this point. I don't yet know whether or not the shooting was justified, if the use of force was justified. There's just not enough evidence. But I'm troubled in the manner in which it was carried out.
So, Laura, do you think it'll make a difference, as Philip has said, you know, that you don't fire until you know not only what's in front of you, but what's behind that? Do you think it'll make a difference, Laura, that future legal action, police have already said this was an accident, we didn't mean to shoot Betty Jones? How does that help or hurt? It certainly doesn't bring her back.
No, it's important to recognize this is one of the first instances where you have the officers admitting to an accident. They admit to an accidental shooting and a tragic event that occurred. And the issue you have here, there are two separate things to evaluate. One is whether Quintonio LeGrier was provoking that particular attack. We don't yet know the incident. We have no 911 call from the father, which describes whether or not the son was actually in a volatile state or an excited state in some way or dangerous. And then you have the second issue of Betty Jones, whether or not she was an innocent bystander who was shot through a door, face forward. We just don't know the information, but what we do know is that the officers who know the information have immediately acknowledged that there was an error that was made with respect to at least one of them. It's a lot to show whether or not there remains to be seen whether Mr. LeGrier was also somebody who was an unprovoked victim.
You know, to watch this, the reaction of the community, how fast it was, how quick it was, they're clearly angry. There's a lot of rancor towards the mayor. What sort of changes, I'll ask you, Philip, quickly, and then you, Laura, have to be made to set this community right? Philip?
Well, throughout the country, police are generally required only to fire 50 or so rounds a year with a 70 to 80% accuracy. That is just woefully inadequate. Individual departments can and should focus more on judgmental shooting, scenario-based training, and that type of thing, because that is what it's going to take to prepare officers for real-life encounters like the ones that they found themselves in, unfortunately, this past weekend.
And Laura, I'm going to go to Laura for the final word. What do you think needs to happen to regain the trust of the community?
The DOJ investigation that's currently underway needs to be expedited. People want answers. They want to know if this was a race-based motivator, whether or not the actual urgency of actually shooting was based on more than simply, recklessness by the officer. They have to have an expedited investigation by the Department of Justice. Otherwise, there will be no resolution in peace in Chicago.
All right. Philip Holloway, Laura Coates, thank you.
Thank you.